Welcome to Weather Wednesday here at New England Storm Center. So, another week, another flood, the fourth Weather Wednesday in a row that we are leading off talking about flooding in New England. Another storm has dropped a widespread 1 to 3 inches across the region, with some areas seeing upwards of 6 inches. This has led to, yes, another round of flooding, road closures, and some damage. On Sunday, a cold front interacted with an extremely moist atmosphere to create rainfall rates that at times exceeded 2 inches an hour. This band of heavy rain moved very slowly northeast as Sunday wore on. Connecticut was one of the hardest hit states this time around. Some of the most prolonged periods of intense rainfall rates fell Sunday morning. As many as 30 roads across the state were closed, either due to water over the road or the road being damaged itself. The Tweed New Haven Airport in the state was forced to shut down on Sunday due to the flooding. Connecticut also experienced severe thunderstorms. Significant tree damage was seen in Wethersfield Sunday morning, where a microburst possibly occurred. A microburst is basically a fast-moving column of sinking air that spreads out when it hits the ground. Winds can often be very intense and damaging during microbursts, and in Weatherfield's case, it was. Neighboring Rhode Island saw very similar impacts to what Connecticut saw, as two separate waves of rain, one in the morning and one in the evening, moved through the small state. A handful of roads became impassable by mid-afternoon. The Providence metro area, which was hit hard by the flash flooding 2 weeks ago on Independence Day, saw their roads all swamped yet again. Like Connecticut, Rhode Island saw some airport issues of their own. T.F. Green International Airport's taxiway ramp was forced to close down due to ongoing flooding. Into Massachusetts, pockets of flash flooding did occur throughout the day. Fitchburg was hit particularly hard in that state, with both street flooding as well as road damage. Several roads in the city became impassable by Sunday. Further east, up into northeast Massachusetts, Middleton saw significant flooding across their town, including a large swath of Route 114. Images from the area showed businesses and cars swamped with floodwater. The entire greater Boston area was placed under a flash flood warning for much of the afternoon and evening, although no big-time flooding did occur in Boston. The National Weather Service also confirmed an EF0 tornado touched down in the central Massachusetts town of North Brookfield. Extensive tree damage occurred in the town, but no property damage or injuries were reported. This is the third tornado to touch down in New England in 2023. In July 13th, just a few days before this event, a tornado was confirmed in Vermont during their severe thunderstorm outbreak. And then, of course, back in the springtime, we had a whole episode dedicated to Maine's landspout, where we did determine that landspouts are tornadoes, so that did count as a tornado. So this is the third tornado in New England in 2023. New Hampshire was also hit hard by the flooding. Flash flooding and road washouts were reported in several towns across the state, including Heinecker, Effingham, Antrim, Hooksett, Candia, Manchester, and Alton. Sunday morning, Manchester was hit hard by the flooding. The city was placed in a flash flood warning during the late morning. More than a dozen roads were closed across the city by the early afternoon. And you can see the picture below is in Manchester, firefighters helping a stranded motorist get out of their car after getting caught up in one of the floods in the city. A NASCAR race in New Hampshire, scheduled to take place at the Loudon Motor Speedway, was forced to postpone Monday. Alton, New Hampshire, which was very likely the hardest hit community across New England, saw numerous road closures across the town. A New Hampshire state police trooper said the town was basically an island, as most roads leading into the town were damaged or flooded. The Alton Department of Public Works stated that most roads in the town were closed, including Route 28, Route 140, and the Mount Major Highway, which is Route 11. The town's public works also noted that the Mount Major Highway had a large sinkhole in it. The town has also seen mudslides along with the flooding. Maine and Vermont were not hit nearly as hard as the other four New England states. There was some sporadic flooding in both of those states, but again, not nearly as hard hit as the other four New England states. And speaking of flooding and Vermont, the long road to recovery for Vermont is fully underway. And this will be a long road to recovery, much like Irene was in 2011. Many projects will take months, some will likely take years. The early stages of cleanup and infrastructure repair has begun. As expected in Vermont, an army of volunteers has stepped up to help get this mess cleaned up as quickly as possible and to help those in need. That happened in 2011. The state really banded together during that flood to get things back up and running as quickly as possible, and the same is happening here 12 years later with this flood. Many communities have been in touch with Vermont Emergency Management, but the state said late last week that they hadn't heard back from about 2 or 3 dozen of them. National Guard troops have been sent in to get contact. Again, a lot of these places in the very, very early stages of cleanup and recovery. Centers did open this past week to help residents recover in the hardest hit communities, including Barre and Ludlow. Shelters that opened for evacuees are just about empty now at this point, as many roads have been made at least accessible and residents have been getting back to their homes to start the cleanup and the insurance work. All roads leading into Ludlow have been made, again, at least accessible. A lot of them not permanently repaired yet, but at least accessible for regular vehicles to be able to get over them. Again, this will be a months-long project to get all the roads back in working order. FEMA assistance registration has opened. The Montpelier City Hall is closed due to flood damage. The city had to move their City Hall operations to a new temporary location. This location is at the Montpelier Senior Activity Center. Large piles of disaster debris are now starting to get hauled away. As far as total damages go, we won't know the full extent of the costs of this disaster for a while. Again, we are still in the very early phases of assessment. A lot of homes and a lot of businesses were damaged, and a lot of them were damaged significantly. So it will take a while before we start getting those estimates. Again, a lot of people just starting the insurance work now to get the damage costs hammered down. So it's been a little while since we've talked about the weather outside of New England here on Weather Wednesday. Just, the weather's been so busy here. We've basically been in winter mode here at New England Storm Center. You know how the winter tends to be the busiest in New England in the winter, and we've been so busy here in the middle of summer that, it's almost like we are in that winter mode. But anyway, a very serious and unrelenting heat wave has struck the western United States thanks to a brutal heat dome. A new heat dome has developed. Heat alerts stretched for more than a dozen states across the West and the South over the weekend. Phoenix has had an excessive heat warning in place since July 1st. This alert does not expire until this Friday. That's a 20-day excessive heat warning. If that's not extended. The city has seen high temperatures over 110 degrees since June 30th. It has now been 19 days in a row at the time of this recording that Phoenix has been over 110 degrees. This has officially beaten the old record, which occurred from June 12th to the 29th in 1974. This new record will continue to extend well past now, with highs over 115 expected for the rest of this week, and highs are looking to stay above 110 into at least next week. A new daily record high was set in Phoenix on Sunday when it hit 118 degrees. Beating a daily record high in the desert in July, the middle of summer, the dog days of summer, is really a tough thing to do. And overnight lows have only been dipping into the 90s in many locations. Can you imagine that? So, when you complain about the temperatures in the 90s in New England, you can now at least be thankful that it's not, that the 90-degree temperatures are not the overnight low. That is just brutal. I can't even imagine it only dropping to the 90s at night. At least 12 sites, including Phoenix, broke or tied a daily record high on Monday, adding to the more than 1,500 daily high temperature records broken in the U.S. so far this month. Phoenix tied its previous daily high temperature record of 116 degrees on July 17th, which was set back in 2005. The heat has once again spread further east. You can remember we talked about the sweltering heat in Texas and Louisiana not too long ago. Well, it's back again. Heat alerts stretch all the way to Mississippi. There's even a heat advisory up for South Florida, where heat index values could hit 110. Much of the northern hemisphere around the world has been dealing with extreme heat recently. This isn't a surprise. An intense, record-breaking summer was expected this year with the formation of a strong El Nino. It was warned about extensively this spring, and here it is, now that we're into the middle of July and El Nino is officially getting strong. So with all of that said, that is going to do it for this edition of the Weather Wednesday podcast here at New England Storm Center. So as always, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and you will hear from me again next Wednesday.